Welcome to Inside Startup Investing, the only podcast where you can invest in every guest. On this episode, I will be speaking with the founder and CEO of Windlift, Rob Creighton. So at this point, you've probably seen wind turbines that generate clean energy from wind, right? Perhaps you've even seen a wind farm of large wind turbines filling massive expanses of land. For a number of reasons, these wind farms have faced pretty steep opposition over the years. For their vast use of space, their negative impacts on the flight paths of birds, and frankly, the eyesore that these wind farms can be. Enter Windlift. This is the idea child of Rob Creighton. Over the past decade plus, Robert and his team have been developing tethered flight drone technology that can produce power like a wind turbine with far more efficiency and perhaps, just as importantly, can be made to function at heights well above the clouds, removing the eyesores that can be wind farms. You see, Windlift is a deep technology company that has been developing the technology to quite literally fly wind-powered drones really high up in the sky, with tethers that come back down to Earth, delivering the power generated by the wind that passes over these uniquely designed drones. These innovative drones may unlock the power of wind in the next 10 to 15 years in a far more efficient way than has ever been done before. But underlying this company is a technology and tech team that has built these wind-powered drone devices that can be tailored for everything from defense missions to thwarting off pirates in the Red Sea with drone technology that is unlike those on the market today. Their proprietary IP is being looked at by major European governments and shipping companies alike for its ability to provide unique capabilities that other drone manufacturers simply can't provide. Windlift's long-term vision of being a major power producer player is still likely 10 years away, but this team's ability to adapt and win commercial and defense contracts as it worked towards its grander ambitions of being a major player in the power-producing sphere certainly make for an interesting potential investment. So with that, let's get on to the show and welcome Robert. For those who don't know you, Rob, give us a little bit of background on yourself and the Windlift story.
I'm the founder and CEO of Windlift. I started the company while I was in business school at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. The university had a great program called the Weinert Applied Venture Fund. They actually invested $100,000 in graduating MBA students. And I thought, instead of going to investment banking or who else, this would be a great way to start my company. That had been my dream, to do airborne power generation, which is the beginning of Windlift. Around 2009, I actually got my first Army contract. I've been working with the Army and the Marine Corps and the Navy, developing the core technologies that kind of make what we do possible today. So it's been a long incubation period. We're a true deep tech company. Most people don't really know. We've been doing AI work since 2011 to, improve our designs and make our machines more adaptable to the environment. And that's really what allowed us to get to where we are today. So the support, almost $24 million of support from the Department of Defense to get our technology to where we are today.
What does this look like? If someone hasn't seen this before, what, you said what you do, but what does that actually mean? What does it look like?
So a lot of people are familiar with quadrotor drones, and our system is essentially a quadrotor drone with a wing attached to it. And, it adapts to the wind conditions and actually can use the wind to generate lift, thus the name of the company, Windlift. And we've developed lots of autonomous controls that allow us to fly that wing on a tether and be very stable and provide a great platform, which is why the military is interested in it. They use it for cameras, radar, communications. But also we've figured out how to fly optimal flight paths to actually pull energy out of the wind and charge a battery on the ground. So it's a really adaptable platform that allows you to stay on station in remote places for as long as the wind blows, and then even when the wind doesn't blow, we can take energy out of the battery and keep flying and keep the mission going.
What is the benefit of something like this? And the reason I ask that, right, is there's solar energy, there is wind energy, but from large mega, fans, whatever you want to call them. So what's the benefit of kind of this drone-esque technology to those things?
So our prototype we're building for the Marine Corps is a very small demonstrator. It weighs 25 pounds, and the same amount of stuff for a wind turbine would weigh closer to 1,000 pounds. So it's just a huge step change in the amount of stuff you need. And that's true because we get rid of the tower and the foundation of a wind turbine and we replace it with a tether and software. So it's super efficient. I mean, if you're a Marine going to a forward operating position, would you rather carry 1,000 pounds of stuff or 25 pounds of stuff? It's a pretty clear answer. In fact, they won't even look at a wind turbine because it's just too big. You got to bring in cranes and you got to bring in cement trucks and all the other stuff. Whereas our system, super mobile, super adaptable. And it's also true for solar panels. It'd be probably 500 to 600 pounds of solar panels to do the same amount of power as our little drone. It's just able to concentrate a lot more energy into the space by flying around and actively getting the energy from the sky.
Now that makes complete sense to me. First off, how much energy can one of these devices produce, and what does that allow you to power?
Oh, so our small prototype it's 3 kilowatts peak, but that's pretty windy conditions. We like to say it kind of averages closer to 1 or 1.5 kilowatts, and that's as much as a single family household in the United States. We consume. You might look at your power bill, you might get somewhere between 24 and 30 kilowatt hours a day. And that's what we could power with our system in a windy area. Like we're talking a coastal region. Like I live in North Carolina, so Cape Hatteras is where I like to go fly kites and kite surf, and that would be plenty of wind to power a single family home out at Cape Hatteras.
The military application obviously makes a ton of sense because, you know, they're in treacherous places. They need to be able to move. So obviously setting up some sort of wind device or solar, devices to get power it really just doesn't make very much sense. Outside of the military application, where do you see the application of this technology in the commercial segment?
The small system is not optimally sized for like power production for the grid. So we've kind of designed a system that would be a 40-foot wingspan, weigh closer to 350 pounds. And that system would produce about 75 kilowatts. The cool thing is that system could fit in a shipping container. So it could be shipped anywhere in the world, say an island in the Philippines or an island in Alaska, anywhere where it's windy, and solar is actually very complementary. Oftentimes when it's windy, the sun's not shining, and when the sun's shining, it's not windy. So if you have a battery and solar and wind and maybe a diesel generator, altogether you would end up using very, very little fuel and saving yourself a lot of money by combining these systems into a microgrid in a remote place. So think a farmer in an island in the Philippines, or I was just in Finland, and they have a lot of wind, and half the year there's no sun because they're so close to the Arctic Circle. So there's no battery big enough to hold that solar energy all the way through the winter. So they want to have a mix of solar and wind to give themselves some adaptability and maybe reduce their fossil fuel demand for their country.
You're many years into this very deep tech project. It's super interesting technology. There is the military application. First off, just thinking about this from a commercial revenue standpoint, in the military segment, how large an opportunity do you think there is to provide this technology to the military in the United States? And then from there, how are you thinking about commercial growth since you are still only working with the smaller device right now?
So the U.S. military opportunity, it's kind of political in some ways. So it's tough to really size that because it really depends on where our military is going. I don't know, our president has now changed it, in the process of changing the name of our military from the Department of Defense to the Department of War. And that's actually kind of what our branches do, because we've got the Pacific and the Atlantic Ocean to defend our borders. There, we don't really think that much about defense. We have the, Coast Guard and Border Patrol, but really our military is kind of going around the world, and we're defending other countries, but we don't defend them by building walls. We defend them by, destroying their enemies. So it's really offense, right? But our technology is a fundamentally defensive technology. So I was just, for instance, in Finland, talking to their Ministry of Defense, and they've got an 800-mile border with Russia, and they also have a lot of maritime borders that they want to defend. So they really think of defense as how can we detect, incoming missiles, incoming drones? How can we have an early warning system so we can have our people go into bunkers and protect themselves? And that's true for a lot of countries. Think Taiwan, think, again, Vietnam. There's a lot of countries around the world that they want to have a very strong defense to protect their borders from aggression. And having that defense deters aggression and hopefully stops wars. But the way I think of it is our platform is an elevated platform that kind of gives you that eye in the sky and allows you to see further, which gives you extra warning. So if you have a ground-based radar, that can see 9 miles, 10 miles before the curvature of the Earth makes it impossible to see low-flying drones and missiles. Whereas our system, flying at 400 feet, 500 feet, generating power, it doesn't cost any money to stay up in the air. In fact, it's actually creating income while it's flying. And it's also providing that early warning system, that early detection of incoming drone or incoming missile attacks. Whereas if you were to fly, like the US has something called an AWACS, which is a Boeing 737 that flies around and has a big radar dish on the top of it. And that's designed to detect all sorts of stuff. But that costs $60,000 an hour to stay in the air. So Vietnam is not going to pay $60,000 to have this plane flying back and forth across its border all day, every day. But they might pay for a system like Windlift, which still gives them that early warning detection capability so they can get their people out of harm's way or launch countermeasures to protect themselves from surprise attack.
Okay, so you're hitting on something, we were talking about, I think what excited you about this opportunity is the ability to generate power from these drones. But now you're kind of hitting on the fact that there's another application here, which is in the surveillance capability. Talk to me about what that looks like and kind of how that's come together.
I don't like to use the term surveillance. It kind of has a Big Brother-esque
Sure.
feeling to it. I like to think of it as situational awareness, where we could, for instance, a major defense prime reached out to us because we are the masters of tethered flight. Because we've learned how to generate power on a tether, we also can fly wings very stably on a tether when they're being towed behind a vehicle or behind a ship. So they reached out to us and they said, based on everything you guys are able to do, can you make a tethered drone that we can pull behind a ship, and we can elevate a camera that can detect a pirate attack or detect a drone attack that is now, I think the biggest example would be in Yemen right now, where the Houthis have been attacking commercial shipping that's trying to go through the Suez Canal. That's cost the global economy over $25 billion in the last year because ships are now routing around the Cape of Africa. So they have to spend all this extra money on fuel, and it takes them 10 extra days. So it's just a huge expense to ship goods from India or Asia to Europe. Now it's creating a huge expense, adding to inflation, creating all sorts of problems with world trade. Whereas our system can be towed behind a ship and provide this elevated platform that's flying at 800 to 1,000 feet, and they can look out. So instead of seeing 8 miles, we're seeing 40 or 50 miles, which gives them early warning. They can call in, an Air Force from somewhere nearby to actually help defend these ships from attack and protect these innocent sailors that are just trying to do their job. And they're literally, their ships are being sank and people are dying. It's terrible. Hopefully a technology like ours can deter attack and help, reduce the cost of a t-shirt from Vietnam and France.
Before we dive back into today's episode, I want to tell you about something exciting happening this month. Investment Crowdfunding Week is coming September 29th through October 2nd, and this is the event for anyone serious about startup investing. We're talking 4 days of deep dive sessions with industry leaders, platform CEOs, and seasoned investors who have been in the trenches. Whether you're just getting started with Reg CF investing or you're looking to level up your deal analysis skills, this virtual event has something for you. I'll be there, and I think you should be too. Head to the link in our show notes to register, and trust me, you don't want to miss this one. So when you think about, as an investor, right, what we're trying to understand is how big can this be? It almost sounds like your core product or your core differentiator as a company is really low-cost tethered flight. And then what you can do with that tethered flight, you can generate energy, you can use it for looking out, for lack of a better word, if we're not using surveillance. And I imagine there's some other applications as well. Where do you get excited about the long-term opportunity that could really make this, a major company?
Well, so my background is actually as a biologist. And when I started Windlift, I'd been working on the Human Genome Project, and I became fascinated by the process of evolution. And it's an iterative process where, organisms are constantly evolving to optimize their niche. So their survival of the fittest, right? They're getting more fit to better be in a niche environment. So with my team, Mark All and Andy Stow, and we developed actually a software system that allows us to quickly design machines, in our case, aerospace machines that can fulfill a particular niche, or military terms, a particular requirement. So when the Marine Corps comes to us and says we need it to be under 50 pounds, we can put that as a constraint on our software, and then we can design a machine that can fit that constraint, and then we can optimize it. So it optimizes, in our case, the currency is power generation oftentimes, but in the case of this guard system that's being pulled behind a ship, that system is being optimized to be very, very stable and minimize the cost. So we can actually target, my engineers say we use computers to do stuff. The more technical term is we do autonomously directed synthetic evolution, or some people call it an AI guided process for machine design optimization. So that's a big mouthful, but what that describes is this process that we built where we design, build, and test machines in a virtual environment using very, very high fidelity, I'd say a large physics model that was developed by a professor at the University of Champaign-Urbana, Illinois, Michael Seelig. He's a genius. He's like the godfather of modeling and simulation for all sorts of drones and all sorts of aircraft that you can develop. And then Mark All actually got his PhD at University of Cincinnati developing the optimizer that we use. So that's a very sophisticated process. It's basically an AI machine learning process. And we put all that together, and now we can actually integrate that with building physical devices that feed data back into that process. So every step of the way, all of our prototypes are heavily instrumented and allow us to feed that data back into that process. So it's an incredibly complicated. I could go on for like literally an hour about how all the pieces work. We're really proud of it because it was hard to do, and we had to learn the hard way. We made a lot of mistakes along the way, and that's why it took so long for us to develop this process. But the end result is when a major defense prime calls us up and says, hey, we need you to design something that can meet these requirements, we actually design, built, test in simulation in less than a couple of weeks, and then we built it in the real world in a couple of weeks, and we just tested it last week, and the system flew at twice the speed that any other competitor's drone could operate on a tether. So we just completely destroyed the competition using this process that we originated.
So if you take all of that science, all of that technology, everything that you've developed, where can that take you from a commercial perspective?
Well, it allows us to really quickly iterate on systems. So the systems we built now are very early stage prototypes in some ways, in that they work, they do what we say they can do, but with investment, with time, with more iterations, we can very, very quickly work our way down the cost curve. And our current costs are pretty high because, it's custom designed systems. It's like every time we build a prototype, it's like we're building a Bugatti or like a Formula One racing car, right? It's like a super sophisticated carbon fiber with custom electronics and custom parts. But once we have that design and we iterate it through that process a few more times, well, we can design it to be cheaper. We can design it to be easier to manufacture. We can design it to be easier to mass produce with robots. So we get that labor cost out. We can get the cost of materials out. Traditional engineering process might take, a decade or more to get that cost out. We think with our software systems and the AI guided approach that we have to optimization, we can get those costs down really quick. And then we can start competing in more markets and targeting, it's basically the cost of electricity is the cost of the machines. So it's really unlike, oil and gas, which I love oil and gas. We actually make our machines from thermoplastics, which come from oil, and we make our, carbon fiber from natural gas. I just think we should stop burning oil and gas. We should start making these amazing products that now can generate electricity for a much, much lower cost, and you never have to refuel them. And as they get better and more reliable, cheaper, it's just we work our way down that curve until the cost of electricity from our devices can revolutionize, change everything.
So is your thought that and this feels like it could be a little ways off in 10, 15 years, we could be at a place where you can generate power at a lower cost than, say, putting up these massive wind turbines and putting up major solar projects, that this would actually be a more cost affordable way of doing that?
I think we could do it in 3 to 5 years if we had the capital and we had the willpower and the community of people supporting it. And which is one reason I went on crowdfunding, because I want that story to go out. I want people to say, like, we can do this. There's the only thing stopping us is our will and the ability to have a vision for the future.
So what would that look like to get it to a lower cost than, say, the mega wind turbines that are built? Quite literally, would this be a tether with just an unbelievably massive drone? Is that what this looks like?
No, it doesn't have to be that big, right? It's like, why not build 1,000 systems, instead of one giant system? Like a solar panel, what's the right size for a solar panel? It's big enough that a guy can take it off a truck and put it in a rack. And you don't see solar panels as big as a football field. It's like you just see a lot of them in a field that has been constructed one by one. We can do the same thing with wind turbines. And that's the real advantage of airborne power generation, is that because we're sweeping a big area with a small drone, you don't get the same advantage to getting bigger. In fact, once you get to a certain size, you start to lose that advantage. Think of think of like, what's the biggest airplane that you've seen? Like, you're not going to have an airplane with 10,000 people on the airplane because of just the limits of the physics of an airplane. Mm-hmm. It might be more economical to do that, but we don't do that because it's just the physics. It's the same with our system. It's like, you don't want to, an albatross doesn't fly like a hummingbird. Like, we want our system to be more like a hummingbird. We just want to have thousands of them. And also they're smaller, so you can't see them. They'll be, for offshore wind, for instance, they'd be over the horizon, or they'll be in places where they're really not a visual impact. So that's how I think of airborne power generation. In the early stages, we're definitely going for the highest value customer, which is the defense customer, because they want to put cameras. They need power in remote places. Getting energy to a remote place isn't just expensive, it's dangerous when someone's blowing up your fuel trucks. So that's a really clear high value customer, and that's why we've targeted them first. They're also the only customer that will pay you to develop technology that they want to buy. Right. Like, I can't go down to the power company. I went to Duke. I made that mistake when I first got started. And I was like, I went to Duke Energy and I was like, hey, I got this cool technology. It can lower the cost of electricity. And they're like, when? And I'm like, I don't know, 10 years if you give me $25 million. And they were like, yeah, that's not something we want to do. So I made that mistake. I even went to NGOs. I was like, hey, we can make power for like poor people in Africa that need energy just to pump water for their wells, and we can develop a machine that can do that. They're like, well, how much money do you need to develop that? I'm like, I don't know, super simple mechanical system. And I had a design for that. And I was like, maybe 500,000, maybe $800,000. They're like, no, we'll buy some when you build it, but you got to find the money to do that yourself. So then I accidentally, I got invited to go talk to the Power Surety Task Force up at Fort Belvoir in Virginia. And I pitched to them, and they were like, that sounds kind of crazy, but we're kind of curious because we have this desperate need for, ways to reduce our fuel trucks getting blown up. And then they called me back like 2 weeks later and like, give us a proposal for less than $1 million and it's funded. So I gave them a proposal for $967,000. And now that I know how the military works, I regret to this day I didn't make it $999,000. So that's how I got my first real funding was through that and through the business school that got me started.
Wow. In terms of go-to-market strategy with the applications you're aware of today, what is your approach?
Well, the defense is our first target, but that's always very political. So we're looking now at other countries. So I just got back from Finland, and it was an amazing trip. And they need, to defend their border with Russia. So that would be a good market for us. The Ukraine actually very interested. The war in Ukraine is an energy war. They can't get fuel to the front lines. That's why there are no tanks operating within hundreds of miles of the front lines, because it's not just that the tanks are targets, but the fuel trucks are the biggest target. And they can't move fuel. They can't get electricity. They can't maneuver. Mm-hmm. Defending borders like Taiwan, and all these places where it's like they could use our technology to deter aggression. So that's how I've always thought. It's almost like it's like a 21st century wall that's going to make people think twice before they want to attack. It's going to increase the cost of aggression, which I hope reduces the risk of war. That's, if you look through history, there's always like technological moments where the cost of war for an aggressor drops low enough that then they can like create an empire, right? Because it's like they have the technical advantage. The Romans had it, the Greeks had it, the French had it with artillery and Napoleon. I mean, all the great empires in history were created by a brief moment when they had a technological advantage that reduced the cost of aggression, allowed them to create a huge empire. And that's kind of how I see our technology having an influence on the world stage.
When you think about, an exit for investors, where do you see that coming from? What are your thoughts on that?
Another reason we're doing crowdfunding is to publicize the opportunity, create a larger pool of investors that are interested, and that'll allow us, hopefully in the next 6 to 12 months, to actually create a secondaries market, which will create some liquidity for early investors. I believe that's important. People don't want to feel like their money's locked up for 10 years before they can get an exit. They should want to invest in Windlift for 10 years because we're just going to keep increasing the value of the company if our software keeps working like the way it has been. But just having that optionality, I think, is important to investors. We most likely would have acquisition target on our back as we prove out our software with this pulling guard project. I mean, the APG is definitely the highest value market in the future in terms of scale. A lot more people want energy than want to defend their ships. Acquisition is probably the most likely. I mean, if we can get enough investors that want to support our work and we can start scaling and really start manufacturing with that larger pool of investors, an IPO is not an impossibility, but the amount of capital to get to that point, to scale manufacturing, to do all those things, that's probably a lower probability. But those would be the three ways that investors could see an exit from their Windlift investment.
For those investors who are on the line, they're thinking about it, but they're not there yet, I want to give you the last word. What do you want them to know?
I want them to know that Windlift is a software-first company. The hardware and the products that we are selling are an expression of the software. And we are, as we grow, we're building an ecosystem of partners that are actually expressing a lot of interest in our software tools as well. So these are all areas that we as a company haven't really explored yet. We've been working in the defense ecosystem for the last over a decade, and we've developed incredible technology in that ecosystem. And now we're ready to go commercial for all these other opportunities. So we don't know exactly how far we can take these tools we've developed. I'm excited for the future, and I'm looking for people who want to help us grow these opportunities and be part of this incredible journey that we're on.
If you like what you heard on the show today, you can check out why Windlift received a 4.8 out of 5 on our proprietary rating scale at kingscrowd.com. You can also invest on WeFunder until November 28th, 2025. And as always, if you liked what you heard on the show today, please like, subscribe, and share our podcast wherever you listen so more investors like you can find us. Thanks for tuning in, and happy investing.